Welcome to my listening session. This is an excerpt from The Complete Package. Lenny Barclay believed mornings were the best part of the day. Hope was a gift that appeared with the sunrise and brought new and exciting possibilities. She couldn't understand why most people clung to habitual routines that destroyed the potential for adventure. She'd always been an early riser, determined to make the most of each day's fresh start. When she and Prue first moved to Pinedale, she began each morning at a different restaurant or cafe and sampled every cup of coffee the town had to offer. She'd learned the best cup was at Kate's Place, which became their favorite haunt, and the worst was at the gas station on the highway. Prue chided her for learning the obvious, but she challenged stereotypes, and once in a while, not often, she was pleasantly surprised. Prue had refused to accompany her on her early morning jaunts, content to stay in bed for an additional 2 hours of sleep. Ironically, since Prue's death, she'd been craving normalcy. As the sun peeked over the horizon, she climbed into her old Jeep, and her dog Rocket jumped in the back. His little brown face looked concerned. "It'll be all right, boy," she said, scratching the white tufts of hair that hung around his ears. Once they were on their way, she checked her watch. It was only 20 minutes to the parking area and the 3-mile Blaine Basin hike that ended at the Alpine Lake. It would be an incredible way to start the morning. "I will really enjoy this hike." Prue would want me to go, Lenny thought. Prue's death was her fault. Instead of pressing her to see a doctor when the minor pains had started, she'd agreed with Prue's rationalizations in order to keep peace in the house. She acquiesced to her fear of doctors and hospitals. When the pain worsened, she half-heartedly coaxed her to see Dr. Singh, but quickly backed off when Prue protested. Eventually, it was too late, and Prue's first doctor's visit ended with a transfer to hospice care. She glanced at the passenger seat, Prue's seat, imagining her leaning out the open window, her hair flapping against the breeze. Deflated, she pulled onto the shoulder and turned off the Jeep, wrapping her arms around the steering wheel. She didn't cry. The tears had ended months ago, but loneliness and futility remained like squatters who refused to leave. She'd finally gotten over her death, of this she was sure, but she hadn't resumed her life. "I can't find my life," she muttered. Rocket whined and sailed into Prue's seat. He planted his chin on her bicep and nuzzled her. When she didn't respond, he offered a low growl, and she laughed. "You really should be a life coach, you know that," she said. He wagged his tail and looked at her quizzically. They'd found him as a puppy outside a grocery store in a box a month before they moved to Colorado. Prue figured it was fate, since all 3 of their dogs had passed. He was a full-fledged mutt with an indescribable genealogy, and they always shrugged when people asked what kind of dog he was. Most distinctive were his ears. White tufts of fur hung from their edges, and they always seemed pitched for listening. She sighed and pulled out a pen and a map of western Colorado from the glove box. Peering through the windshield, she saw mile marker 86 in the distance. She wrote the number on the line, indicating Highway 62. 3 miles further than last time. She showed him the map as if he could read, proud of her accomplishment. "We'll get there again eventually, even if it is without Prue this time." She threw the Jeep in drive and U-turned back to Pinedale. It was 7 o'clock, and there was still time to grab a cup at Kate's Place before she headed to the animal shelter for an hour or 2 of volunteer service. Before she opened the shop, she'd stop in quickly at the library, which served as the makeshift town hall. As Pinedale's mayor, she had few daily duties to perform, but she always liked to check in with Maddie, the town clerk, and the only paid employee. In her mind, Maddie was the one who really ran things, and she just signed stuff. Kate's Place was buzzing with Monday morning commotion. All of the tables were full, and a to-go line formed near the register. She waved to several townies as she stepped behind a woman who smelled like rain. She rarely noticed such things, but the lady's scent reminded her of being outdoors in happier times. Even from the back, she knew she was a stranger with money. She shifted her weight from side to side, obviously impatient. Definitely an out-of-towner. While she was dressed casually, her L.L. Bean plaid shirt was freshly ironed, her black boots polished, and the designer jeans she'd chosen clung to her bottom perfectly. She blinked and stared at the floor. She knew the color was rushing to her face. "Hello, Madam Mayor." She looked up at Jimmy, an enormous African-American waitress toting a paper cup of coffee. "Good morning, Jimmy, and you don't have to call me that." Jimmy's curls bobbed with her head shaking. "Nuh-uh, you're the mayor and worthy of respect. I saw you come in and I just poured this, nice and hot, 2 sugars. She smiled and handed her the coffee, which seemed miniature size in her enormous hands. She knew Jimmy was a former shot putter in high school, and while much of her bulk had turned to fat, she could fly across the restaurant in a matter of seconds to break up a fight or grab a meal jumper headed out the door. "Thanks, but I could have waited in line like everyone else." "You shouldn't have to, and that's Kate's rule, not mine." She realized the attractive woman with the nice rear end had turned around and was listening to the conversation. She glanced at her and was struck by the blueness of her eyes. Of course, Prue's blue eyes were still the prettiest she'd seen, but this woman was handsome, with striking features that commanded respect. Aquiline nose, high cheekbones, and full lips. Her curly brown hair twisted over her shirt collar, suggesting a wild side. "You're the mayor?" She nodded, and Jimmy added, "She's the best mayor this town has ever had," before she hustled back to her tables. "I think you're the person I need to speak with. I'm Sloan McHenry, CEO of Wilderness Campaign." From thin air, a business card appeared between her fingers. "I have a proposition for you that could potentially wipe out unemployment in this town." Lenny raised a suspicious eyebrow. "Really?" Now she had her attention. She scanned the gold print on the card and asked, "So, Ms. McHenry, where do you want your store to go?" Her broad smile cracked for a split second, but she regained her poise and glanced around the busy diner. "I don't do business in a coffee line, Madam Mayor." She scowled and said, "Just call me Lenny, please. Lenny Barclay." They shook hands, and she was impressed with Sloane's grip and the calluses on her palms. She obviously wasn't afraid of hard work. "Is there a more convenient time when we could discuss this matter? When might you be in your office?" Lenny grunted. "Try never. There isn't an office, and I didn't even run for the damn position. Not really." She looked confused, and Lenny could tell she was uncomfortable. The conversation wasn't going as she planned, which pleased Lenny immensely. Although she never asked to be mayor, the town had placed an enormous amount of trust in her, even if it was out of pity over Prue's death. They figured she needed something to take her mind off her troubles. Being mayor of tiny Pinedale seemed like a manageable distraction, and on most days it managed itself, except whenever carpetbaggers like Sloan McHenry appeared, wanting to worm their way into the Pinedale economy. More than a few slick operators had treated her to a steak dinner at the Chatsworth Hotel, hoping to gain a favor with the town council. Of course, none of them was this attractive, Lenny thought. "Well," Sloan said slowly, "you name the time and place." "How about there?" she asked, pointing to a window. "Say 2:00. She watched as Sloan realized what was beyond the window. "You want to meet on Mount Sneffels?" Lenny grinned. "Fine by me," Sloan said. Lenny stiffened. She'd assumed the well-heeled, refined lady wouldn't want to get her expensive leather boots dirty. She's called my bluff, Lenny thought, and I can't even bring myself to drive to the trailhead yet. Sloan grinned and leaned closer, and the smell of rain filled Lenny's senses. "Didn't think I'd agree, did you?" Lenny shook her head. "I'm very familiar with the trails in this area, and I'm the CEO of an outdoor company. To keep my board of directors happy, I have to hike, fish, camp, ski, and kayak, preferably all at the same time. So do you want to meet here or at the trailhead?" Lenny felt what little pride she had slink out the door. She was in over her head, and she sensed this woman posed a threat to the town. She'd need to be careful, and she probably needed help. She needed Prue. "I could pick you up here," she found herself saying as Sloan stepped up to order her coffee. "Sounds great. I'll be outside at 2." She waited until Sloan paid, and they left together. "Do you have hiking equipment? If not, I could loan you a backpack or some poles." Sloan lifted her blue eyes from her cup, and Lenny's pulse raced. "I think I'm covered, unless we're planning on rappelling or possibly staying overnight." She nearly spit up her coffee. It wasn't a question. It was an invitation. No, this is just a nice 3-mile hike to an alpine lake. Should only take us about 2 hours or so." "The Blaine Basin Trail?" Yes. Have you been there before?" She nodded. "It's lovely, don't you think?" Lenny looked away. "Yeah," she said, "it's beautiful." The long pause that followed was almost enough to make her blurt an excuse and cancel the invitation. Although her adventurous nature was slowly returning, 3 miles further down the road that morning, this was a commitment. She'd have to make it all the way there without having a breakdown on the trail in front of a stranger. Can I do it? She thought. Sloan obviously recognized the shift in her mood and said kindly, "Well, I love it. It's one of my most favorite places in Colorado." Lenny's defenses slipped a notch when she heard the admiration in Sloan's voice. "You really know the area? I have a house in Telluride, and of course there are wilderness campaign stores throughout the state. I come here as often as I can, although I call Boston my home." "Never been there. It's a great city. Not my favorite," she had quickly added. "That would be Geneva, followed by Quito. Fabulous climbing in Switzerland and Ecuador." "Haven't been to either of those places," Lenny said with a shrug. "My life is west of the Mississippi. Always has been, always will be." The definitiveness of her tone ended the conversation. She hated ostentatious people who flashed their wealth by what they wore, what they did, or what they said. Yet she'd learned to temper her disdain since Pinedale needed them to survive. "You never wanted to travel?" Sloan probed, "or you just haven't had the opportunity?" "Both," Lenny said, annoyed at her intuitiveness. Sloan stepped off the porch and tripped over the uneven pavement that Lenny had fought unsuccessfully to repair. As she fell forward, Lenny reached out with her free hand and caught her. She steadied herself in Lenny's embrace, her face crimson. For the briefest moment, she looked vulnerable. In a second, the cool demeanor returned. "Good hands, Mayor Barclay. I see neither of us spilled a drop of our coffee. Did you play sports in school?" She stepped away and shook her head, completely flustered. "I haven't been that close to any woman in a year," she thought. "Well, I'll see you at 2, Sloan said, heading toward a large black Range Rover. Lenny felt her disdain returning at the sight of the huge machine. She crossed the lot to her old Jeep. She could still smell Sloan's cologne on her shirt. Rain. She smells like rain. The Range Rover pulled up beside her. The passenger window rolled down and Sloan handed her a leather portfolio. Pinedale proposal was visible through the oval window in the center of the cover. "I'll give this to you now," she said over the hum of the engine. "I'm guessing there's only a 50-50 chance you'll show up this afternoon." "Why would you say that?" Lenny said in disbelief. Is she reading my mind? "Something's up with you, Mayor Barclay, and I've possibly pissed you off as well by sounding snotty." She sighed and said, "Damn, I can't believe I've screwed this up so badly." "What?" She raised her chin and gazed at her, all business. "I apologize if I've said anything to offend you. I would very much like us to take a hike together and discuss this proposal along the way. Would you be amenable to such an arrangement?" Her smile was incredibly persuasive. I'll bet she gets whatever she wants most of the time, Lenny thought. She imagined this persona was the one most people saw, a cool, well-spoken, detached ice queen who was never surprised. But it was too late. Lenny had already seen her lose her cool, be a klutz and fumble for words. She liked that woman better, and she definitely wanted to see her again. "Amenable?" she said with a slow grin. "Why, I don't think I know that word, Miss McHenry." Sloan threw her head back and laughed. Lenny's gaze followed the curve of her chin to the base of her lovely neck before she drove away. This concludes this listening session. I hope you'll enjoy my other recordings. Subscribe to my channel and visit my website, AnnRoberts.net.